talking about today the Songo, which I told you we would talk about last time when we did, what did I do? I think I did the Neil Peart Rush thing. And I thought the Songo would be good. It's an Afro-Cuban rhythm, one of my favorite patterns, I think. Real versatile, can use it a lot of different ways. I'm not a Latin player. You're not going to confuse me with, any of the great Latin drummers. But, it's always good to have a couple of these patterns because they work so well with a lot of things. And they even sound cool in a rock setting, with the right song. So I think I heard a Songo the first time, well, I'm not trying to think. I'm sure it was back at Musicians Institute, but I'm sure it was probably in a Latin class or something. But there was a player, I think his name was Joey Heredia, who I think was subbing for our regular Latin teacher. And Joey Heredia is a great drummer. There's a great CD called Frankenballet Live at the Baked Potato. And Joey Heredia is on there. I think there's a song called The Taste of Brazil, which is probably one of my favorite guitar-centered records of all time. It's just if you like shredding and just really great, virtuoso performances, it's a pretty good one. I think Kei Akagi's the piano player, but Joey Heredia is a really good Latin player, and I think he played a Songo in class one day, and that's where I heard it the first time, and I was kind of hooked. Weckl plays it a lot in his Latin stuff. I've heard different people. Cliff Allman plays it on Michel Camilo records, and there's lots of variations. Like I said, I'm playing more of a traditional one that you can find written in Latin books. They take it all over the place. They do all kinds of stuff. They mix it in with, different clave parts and cascara patterns on the ride. And those are cool too. But if you can learn 3 or 4 different Latin patterns, I really think that helps your independence. There's a lot of linear aspects to them also. But there's just a feel that you can't beat. So, but we're going to talk about a little more of a traditional Songo, and again, there's variations. So I'm sure someone might, if they've played one, might have tweaked it, played it a little different, or heard someone else play it and said this is a Songo pattern, play it a little different. But you should incorporate these different genres in your playing. It just helps whatever playing that you do more often, it makes you a better player, because these sort of break down barriers that perhaps if you're just playing Metallica, you're probably not going to play the kind of independence that it takes to play a Songo very often. So it really helps you with whatever genre you're playing. So take some time to learn. That's why jazz is important also. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Songo. We're going to, real quick though, shout out to Dave Capps, who came into town from Alabama, and I've kind of helped him out with lessons and drums and stuff via phone. I think we're going to start doing Zoom lessons. But I've known Dave since high school, but hadn't seen him for like 3 decades probably. So, but he was in town, so it was nice catching up with him. And we had about an hour to go through some lessons after we caught up. And the key thing that I reminded him, and it kind of struck a bell, most of the things that I do here are based on student requests or things I've done with students. And I'm not much of a bragger, but I think that's one of the reasons some people really like my videos, is because they're pretty practical most of the time. Sure, I do some stuff with Plini and 1916 and stuff like that. But even that stuff has come out of students. I never heard of Plini before a student, introduced me. Someone was into Dream Theater and mentioned 1916. So generally, these are practical lessons that I do with students. Which gets back to Dave Capps, who is going to sort of, he's new to drums, and he's new to reading. And it's one of the things I've always said, to read or not to read. That is the question. And a lot of people have asked me over the years, well, I don't want to read, I just want to play. And then they'll cite, John Bonham didn't know how to read, and Neil Peart didn't know how to read, and Buddy Rich didn't know how to read. And all of those things are true. And you don't have to know how to read. It's absolutely true, once again. And those three players are about as good as it gets, right, anywhere. But for all the drummers that you say don't know how to read, I can list Steve Smith and Dave Weckl and Vinnie Colaiuta and Greg Bissonette and all kinds of players that can read, okay? So what's the advantage, you might say? Well, the advantage showed up at that lesson with Dave Capps last Sunday. We went through some simple reading, some simple notation, quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. He did a great job. Picked them up pretty quick and played them. And then we went through a simple beginning pages of a rock book, and we played about 9 rock patterns. And again, he did a really good job and kind of had an idea of the page. And then I noticed, though, that if I played something, he was a really good listener, and he can pick up what I played, and then he could mimic it. But I also noticed he wasn't looking at the book when he was playing back what I was playing. So he was memorizing it and listening, and his ear was good, which is great. But what happens in the lesson then is if I was to teach that way only, and I told him this, I said, now you're going to drive home wherever you live. He lives in Alabama, but most people don't live that far. You're going to drive home. When you get home after a 15-minute drive, you're going to sit at your drums. Are you going to remember these 9 patterns that we just worked out? So I closed the book, and I said, play those 9. And he kind of looked at me and said, yeah, you got me on that one. Yeah, I got him on that one, because you don't remember the 9, but if I open the book, he's going to play those 9. And not only is he going to play them, he's going to play them, and he's going to get them maybe not totally memorized, but he's going to have them much better for the following week, because he's going to have that roadmap in front of him. And it's sort of equated to, if you've ever done a play, I've been in church plays, I've never been on Broadway or in the theater, but we've done a lot of passion plays, Easter and stuff, and you get parts, right, and you memorize your parts, and I was never that good at that. But the point is, you memorize it. If they gave you your lines and you looked at them for 5 minutes, and then they closed the book and said, let's do the play, you probably couldn't do it, right? It takes time. You got to memorize it. It takes weeks sometimes to memorize. Some people have, obviously, thousands of words to memorize. Well, you've got thousands of notes to memorize, and if you don't read it, it's much more difficult, right? So we went through that. He opened the book, and I think he realized, oh, wait a minute, you're right. If I could just go through this. So think about that with the Songo, right? Now I'm going to have the notation up on the screen right there. But if you're unfamiliar with the Songo, and I sit down and play, and I say, all right, great lesson, have a great week, come back and play that next week. Probably not going to work out real good. But if you just learn to play eighth notes, because that's all the Songo is for the most part, eighth notes, which usually you're working on eighth notes week 2 of drum lessons. And no, the Songo's a little harder than sitting back and playing. I get all that. But it's all connected, right? So if you could learn eighth notes, you can break down this pattern and you can play a Songo, which is a pretty intricate pattern, especially for a beginner. Okay? All right, so to read or not to read, that is the question. The answer is to read. Okay? Work on your reading and then work on your playing. If I could interview my old drum teacher when I was 13, he would tell you, because I told him many times, he would ask me about practice, and I would say, yeah, I worked on these. You know how I worked on them? I worked on them, and I got them down pretty good, and then I'd solo for a half hour, okay? And then I'd come back, and I'd work on the next one. And then I'd solo for 20 minutes. And then I'd go to the next one. Well, I developed my chops doing that, right? But for the lessons, had I just worked 30 minutes on the part, things would have gone a lot quicker, right? So luckily for me, I'm thinking of it's the summer, you're out of school, and there are times I spent several hours practicing, probably several hours soloing, and probably about 30 minutes of practice. So, but and he knew this, and years later, I got to talk to him one time. We laughed about it, but the point is, focus on your reading, get it down. You can always play by ear. Work on your reading, and then close the book. Put on your Metallica and play, or your Plini, or your Dream Theater, or whatever you're into, or your Buddy Rich, and or Chick Corea, which everyone should be into. Okay. Chick Corea Electric Band, everyone should be listening to it. Go find Got a Match on YouTube. Mind blown, but don't throw your drumsticks away or burn them in the fireplace. You don't have to be that good to enjoy the drums. It's another thing to remember. Okay, Songo. Songo starts off all eighth notes, right? It's got a quarter note pulse throughout on the hi-hat or on the bell, whatever. I play it on the bell a lot, but you play wherever you want. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the Songo. Now you can memorize that. Dave, if you went home from Alabama, that you can remember. Okay. And then it comes in with an accented snare on and. 1, and then a bass on the 1, 1, and. Beat 2 is kind of linear-ish, right? 2, and 2, and 2, and the is accented, but the E is not. So the E is kind of a ghost note, right? 1, and I like using the rim shots for this. I should have adjusted my snare drum. I changed snare drums for this because I like this pearl free-floating brass snare better for this sound, but I did not adjust my snare drum stand lower, which I should have done, so I'm more prepared for my rim shots. So, but there's no editing. Okay. 1, 1. Okay, that's the first 2 beats, right? 1, okay, beat 3. 3, sorry, I said these were all 8th notes. These are mostly 16th notes. Okay, week 3. Okay. Week 1, quarter notes. Week 2, 8th notes. Week 3, 16th notes. 1. Okay, now we got beat 4. 4. 4. 4. Okay, 1. That's the Songo. Okay. A lot of people put the hi-hat, extra independence part, makes it a little harder, on the ands. Okay? Now, again, if we break this down, the bass drum part, 1, 1, and a 3, and a 3, and a 40, and a 1, and a 3, and a 3, and a 40, and a 1, and a 3, and a 3, and a 40, 1, and a 3, and a 3, and a 40, and a... That's the hi-hat bass drum part, and then you're filling in the rest with your hands, okay? If we break it all down and we add the hi-hat, okay? Let's see. No editing, so I'm not sure. This could be harder than I think. Joe Heredia would have yelled at me for doing that, but I've kind of morphed into that over the years. I kind of like that downbeat. Could be technically incorrect, but usually usually people don't frown on that too much as long as you capture sort of the vibe of it. So you can move things around, obviously. I like putting an open hi-hat. Flurry of I'm not sure what. Anyway, so you can move it around. Use your toms, use your hi hat, floor tom, and just get the feel of it. It's got to have that feel. It's got to kind of groove, and the accents are kind of important. But you can move those around a little too. People do move the accents around. Even in the books, when you look at the different patterns, the accents moved. So there's lots of ways to do, but you get to capture that feel. You can do it again on the hi-hat. It's kind of played a lot fast, so it's kind of a faster groove, and it lends itself. You can play it pretty fast. It's got a really good feel to it while you're playing. And again, when you play it faster, some of the accents might move to different. Again, that's up to you. You sort of make it your own. But again, you get the feel. It's not like saying, hey, this is the AC/DC Back in Black rhythm. Songo, there's probably, a dozen different ways, maybe more. If you really talk to, Efren Torres, who was another teacher of mine at MI, and Chuck Silverman, who passed away a few years ago. I mean, these guys could play Songo all over the place, all different things. Tremendous Latin players. Independence, unbelievable. And again, we don't have to necessarily be that great, but it's a good idea to have some facility with some Afro-Cuban rhythms. Obviously, Brazilian rhythms, things, this lends itself good for, you can use this in rock or fusion for sure. Everybody should know a samba, right? Everybody should know what a clave is. And if you want to learn about those things, send me a note, and we'll work on clave patterns with cascara rhythms on top, that I think you traditionally would play on a timbali, sort of the side of it, But anyway, all these things, it's a great pattern for a lot of things. And definitely if you want to play fusion, because there's a lot of Latin. Check out Michelle Camilo, obviously Chick Corea, the Electric Band, but in other, band variations. Even like Tito Puente and guys, what's the trumpet player? I forgot, but I mean, there's you can find great Latin players, but Camilo for me is fantastic. If you listen to Camilo, Weckel played with Camilo way back in the day. Um, Cliff Allman plays with him, but anyway, that Francambali record. It's an interesting thing because that Francambali record is a fusion shred record basically, and again, Joey Heredia is playing on that. And he's a Latin guy, but man, he plays so cool. The things he plays on that are so good. And then they switch into that Touch of Brazil song, which is much more Latin based. And of course, he tears it up because of his Latin ability. But while he's playing the straight fusion stuff, he's killing that too. And that's what I always appreciated, were these guys that could move seamlessly between genres, not just adequately but brilliantly, right? And just kill it. And obviously guys like Weckel and Vinny and people like that can do all that, but there's a lot of other people that can do it too, but you have to practice this stuff, right? And so this is just one out of a lifetime of Latin patterns that I've always liked. So the Songo, this is not a pattern or something that a student brought to me, right? I don't get many students that walk in and say, I want to play Latin. I don't get many students who say, I want to play jazz, sadly. However, when you introduce them to different things, they start to realize, wow, that's a cool pattern, and I'd like to have that, in my arsenal. If you're playing in college or you're in a high school band, even the jazz band, there's going to be Latin parts. It's not always just going to be samba. Right? It's not always just going to be that. They're going to want some other things played, right? And a Songo fits really nice with that, even if you have to alter maybe the bass or something. So practice, practice, practice. The Songo is a great pattern. Everyone should know it. And to read or not to read is the way to go. I don't know if I took this off yet or not, because I do things a little, out of order. I don't know where I'm going to put the notation. But think about the Songo as my example. If you can't read 16th notes, and I played that Songo, especially the last way I played it at that fast tempo, and said, okay, you know what 16th notes are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. All right, have a great week. Go home and remember that and play it. Not a chance. Not a chance that you're going to go home and remember that. But if you just have some basic concepts, some basic understandings of rhythm and note values, notation, then you sit down and you could play it. And you could ask a lot. And by the way, and this is also true, Eileen Bora, who watches I mentioned her before, who's a tremendous teacher at the Displaying School of Music. I believe she's the faculty coordinator. And not only her, but I think other teachers have said to me over the years, and maybe she hasn't, but many of the teachers that have been there, and especially some of the guitar teachers, there's an old book called the Ted Reed Syncopation Book, which is just basically eighth notes, quarter notes, sixteenths, and eighth notes with syncopation. And they use that book for their guitar piano students because rhythm is difficult for students, right? Note values, the time frame between the notes, it's a difficult thing for students to get on the melody instruments, okay? So that's one of the things over the years they've said is sometimes some of the hardest things is for students to get that rhythm, right? The intervals between the notes right, which is what a metronome's for, right? But I just had a teacher who left who sent some notes to the incoming teacher, and that's exactly what she said. She said, this is a good student, but like many students, they struggle with rhythm, and they struggle with note values, and it's something that she had to concentrate on, and she was making it, pointing it out in the note she left for the incoming teacher. So rhythm is not always easy, but for drummers, it's the first thing we start with, right? There's no, we don't have scales and all of that stuff, which is complex, obviously. We focus solely on rhythm. So we better be really good at it, right? And we better understand these the differences in the note values between the 16ths and the triplets and the 32nd notes and the eighth notes, but so much of it, quarter, eighth, 16th, quarter, eighth, 16th. 3 weeks of lessons with me at the Displaying School of Music, and you'll have a grasp of quarters, eighths, 16ths. Now, orchestrating them on the drums, whole nother thing, right? Playing a songo with the 16ths, whole nother thing. But understanding the rhythm is so important, because then you could open up any book, any rhythm book. Once you get those quarters, eighths, 16ths, you could basically open it and you can figure it out. But if it's foreign to you, it's like a different language. Try opening. I bought a book on Jeff Porcaro once that was written in, I think, Japanese, but it had, and I don't have it anymore, sadly, because I looked for it. And matter of fact, Eileen Bora knows this story, because one day in my office, we were looking through the book. It's all in Japanese, but it had the picture of the album Jeff Porcaro played on, and the book was, needless to say, about that fat, right? And he played on all these records, and I bought it because the record was obviously correct, like whatever, Steely Dan, whatever, Katie lied or whatever. The record was there, and then it lists the musicians. Everything else was in Japanese, okay? So I had no clue what anything else was, but I could read the Jeff Porcaro part. If you could read even a little bit, you can get a lot out of it, and you can learn to play this songo. And you could take this book as an example. Here's a book right here, 1001 Drum Grooves, okay? This looks foreign to a lot of people, but it's pretty easy rhythms. Nothing challenging in this book, just basically quarters, eighths, and 16ths. Here's 1,000 drum grooves. Try to memorize 1,000 drum grooves. Good luck. If you can read a little, you pick that book up, you can play through that book in a month probably, and have unbelievable, have added unbelievable resources to your playing, right? I like to say my bag is bursting. My drum bag is bursting with new ideas, because I've stuffed these new ideas in there, and I could go and I could reference them anytime I want, but through playing, they become part of your regular playing repertoire. So reading, it's the way to go. Doesn't take that long. You can figure it out. Songo. Have a great week. Really important lesson, because the reading thing's a big deal. Dave Capps, good seeing you down from Alabama. I hope you take this lesson and the other ones, and you're working through that book. Eileen Bora, it's just nice that you're still watching the lessons. Let me know. Maybe I'll come out again. Chicago Symphony. Maybe they're doing a Christmas thing. I'll come out and I'll check it out. I'm not a big opera guy, in general. Perhaps you've noticed that. But I do like the symphony. And I like the voices and everything. So, I don't remember what that thing was that I saw last time. It was very cool. And she was very nice. She took me behind sort of the scenes at I'm not sure what it's called. Sorry, what is it, Civic Center? Probably not. But where the Chicago Symphony plays and sings. Anyway, have a great week. Practice, 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 whether it's Plini, Metallica, AC/DC, or you want to get into, by the way, Michelle Camilo, On Fire. Whew, listen to that. Michelle Camilo, On Fire. A songo works in that. I think I've done it. Maybe you alter it a little bit. There's some great Dave Weckl stuff, Festival de Tempo or something. I don't know. You can find the Latin stuff. You can look at the name and pretty much figure it out. Great Weckl stuff, Chick Corea stuff. But Camilo, check out On Fire. Fantastic. One of my favorites of all time. Carib. Oh, Carib from the album Once More Once. Please, my favorite drum fill of all time, no doubt, is on the end of the Carib song from, not other, he plays it on different records. The end of the Carib song on Once More Once, Michelle Camilo. Carib, one of my favorites of all time. Tremendously difficult. Probably some type of songo. But the fill at the end of that by Cliff Allman, my favorite fill of all time. Why haven't I ever done it? Because I can't play it. That's why I haven't done it. Because it's really cool, and it would take me probably a long time to figure out what every detail of his fill is. It's really fast, but it is easily my favorite fill of all time, and it's really it's cool. So don't challenge me and say, hey, you're making me play stuff. You've got to learn that, Phil. Awesome. So there's lots of, there's always something you can't do. You're always striving to get better. That Phil, maybe one day. Carib in general, the song is just so good. It's a song I can't play fast. It's a great song. So there's always things we're striving for. You might be trying to finish off Back in Black and get those riffs down. My friend Frank, been known him for 30 years. He's still trying to work out the Boston riff in Don't Look Back. So we all have our challenges to work on. He's gonna mention that. But we all have our challenges. Keep going. Keep working on them. You can break through and have fun with it. The Songo, Joey Heredia, Franken Valley Live at the Baked Potato, Joey Heredia, Touch of Brazil, the whole album. Michelle Camilo, Once More Once, Carib, Michelle Camilo, On Fire. Try to find the studio versions. You can sometimes go on YouTube and there's all these live things, and sometimes they do it differently. Jazz is kind of improvisational, so they can do some different things. Try to find the studio versions, and then work on your Songo with these, and you can have a lot of fun. All right. Next up, I have no idea. Send me some ideas. I'm happy to. A friend of mine, Ron, mentioned for me to check out some Porcupine Tree, which I'm not really a huge fan of, but he said to check it out. There's a new thing by them, and I will do that, and maybe he had mentioned 2 or 3 songs that he was interested in. So, again, most of these lessons come from students, and that's kind of how it should be, I think. So, so I'll check that out. Gavin, I forgot his name. Gavin somebody. I'm sure someone will remind me, because they always do. Harrison. Gavin Harrison, right? Yeah, Porcupine Tree. There you go. Not a huge fan, but I'm sure I can learn something from him. He's a great drummer. So I'm going to check into some of that. Maybe I'll have some Porcupine Tree for you for the next lesson. Practice, practice, practice. I'm going to do a live one of these. That's another thing. I'm going to do a live Facebook thing once where I could kind of talk to people, I think, in the right side. Rick Beato does it a lot. Of course, Rick Beato has 2 million followers, and I have 1,200. So there's a little bit of a difference there. However, it would still be cool to maybe do something live, maybe field some questions, maybe demonstrate some stuff. I think that would be fun. Brian Drums, what do you think? He's a fan of my demonstrations. What do you call these things? I don't even know. Okay. Anyway, practice, practice, practice. To read or not to read? The question is answered. To read.